just a brief update to all my listener out there. First of all, it's not really. I'm not interested in giving you stock tips and stuff like that. I don't have any record in performing with that, but I did notice I've invested in two silver stocks. They're small caps, AG and CDE. CDE is Coeur Mining. They're the ones I think out of Canada, and they just seem to have a lot more upside potential than downside risk. And if you look at something like gold, GOLD, that mining company stock, it's already kind of, people have already bought into it. That's kind of the obvious first choice, and at this point it's a little too late to invest in something like that. But I invested in them, AG and CDE, earlier this week, and CDE, Coeur Mining, has already gone up 20% since I invested in it, and it's still only at $4. And when in the last recession, I think it went up to I don't know, it was like $40 or $50 or something. So certainly some silver miners are more efficient. If you read their transcripts of their earnings reports and this kind of thing that's available online, you can kind of get an idea. Of course they might kind of exaggerate their numbers just to make the stockholders feel better. I don't think companies are as analytically honest as a scientist has to be, because they can get away with more, and there's not a peer review. But still, it gives you some idea, and then you can look at their fundamentals, which they generally don't lie about as much, like the price to earnings ratio, or one that I was looking at, the debt to equity ratio. For Coeur Mining, that ratio has gone down from like 4.1 to 2.9 or something like that since the last time they reported. Anyhow, I was kind of impressed, and it's got potential to go up maybe tenfold, and that's pretty good as an investment. So meanwhile, Bitcoin's been going up a little bit just really recently. Oh, there we go. But from like 371 to like 390. They have to get Classic. It looks like this might be the winner. XT was sabotaged by some hacker, said he was paid off in Russia to go after it. But Bitcoin Classic will increase the size a little bit, up from 8 kilobytes or whatever, and that can make it go faster. I'm not an expert on that kind of thing, but anyways, I've decided though that I'm going to wait until they get the 75% or close to 75% of these computer nodes that they need before they'll declare Bitcoin Classic the new code, and they'll have what's called a fork, and then that means all the computers that host Bitcoin will switch over to this new faster version of Bitcoin. So, and you can follow Bitcoin news all over the nerd web. So that's my little advice, is like maybe hold out on Bitcoin and invest in CD and AG, and meantime I'm looking at getting a futures trading account. I'm trying to. It seems pretty heavily regulated, so it's a little like they have to really check you out. They don't let amateur investors get into it, I guess, because they don't want just idiots getting in and getting wiped out, or maybe it's just another barrier to entry. I'd be fine letting idiots get wiped out if people can drive on the highway every day. I mean, they should be able to invest in futures. It's not any more risky. But whatever, that's just how it is, and that's what you got to do. So, meanwhile, yeah, everything's kind of playing out as some people had predicted, which is to say, all this loose monetary policy, all this liquidity in the world, all this all this debt, all this leverage is starting to haunt us. We've got just so many overinflated assets everywhere you look. Misallocation of capital, and people are restless, and with the increase in monopolization, like I've been talking about, and to a lesser extent, barriers to entry from regulatory bodies that may have been well-intentioned, but just end up kind of choking up the economy. There's just a lot of metal in the engine of the economy, and it's all starting to like seize up, and wouldn't surprise me if Deutsche Bank goes bankrupt. Puerto Rico is having to try to declare bankruptcy. They're not allowed to, and the hedge fund managers in New York paid off their shills in the Republican Party and to try to keep Puerto Rico debtor's prison. And Venezuela is probably going to, they're already having to get close to defaulting on debts, and it's just kind of a question who's going to go first. I mean, the Japanese market, despite the central bank of Japan declaring negative interest rates, the Nikkei is still going down. The Euro economies and their stocks are going down, and everyone's, they're all like, oh no, freaking out. The Fed sort of, Janet Yellen testified before Congress, and she kind of slightly threw them a bone, but didn't outright say that she was going to stop raising interest rates. So, whew, it's exciting out there. Meanwhile, it might be a while before I report because I'm selling my house. Yep. Certainly, I think the market in Dallas isn't as bad in New York as New York or LA or London or whatever. I was looking on Zillow, and there are a lot of foreclosures in Brooklyn, in New York. And there's a lot of foreclosures. I was looking in San Diego. You go inland from the coast just a little bit. A lot of houses for sale in some of these high-end markets. And then even in Dallas, like in poor neighborhoods, there's a lot of foreclosures. Maybe there always are. I'm not an expert on that. But just, I did read one brief article. No one's really talked about this, but it was like a New York Post article from last year. It said, oh, well, there's a bunch of foreclosures. They've spiked in Brooklyn and areas of New York. But that's a good thing. It was like really weird. The logic didn't even make sense, so I didn't remember it because it was so harebrained. But it was spinning it like it was a good thing, that, or it was just normal that there'd be a big spike in foreclosures. I don't think so. New York's inflated like a kid's balloon, but that big dopey smile is about to just fly around the room, end up in a corner. Yep, everybody's gonna take a hit. So yeah, that's about all. That's kind of what's going on. At some point, I might talk about some things that aren't just strictly economics. I laid down a hedge. That's kind of a neat thing I had never done. That's a European tradition. People don't do that in the U.S. so much. Hedgerows. What you do is you let the tree grow up to a certain height. It doesn't have to be like a really big tree. It's usually a younger tree. And then you chop into it. Oh, you can YouTube it. And then once you chop it, you let the bark have just a thin section here, and you can like lay it down. And it won't die, and since it's the winter time, it's the best time to work on trees, whether you're pruning or whatever. And in the spring, it'll start to flower, and it'll keep growing out along the line. And so you get a lot of these trees, and you lay them all down, and then you can interweave them, and they basically they grow horizontally, so they become like part of a fence. And that's what the hedge is. And different styles exist. You can weave them together, and just check it on YouTube. There's different styles out of England and France and all. It's very cool. So it's gonna be nice. It was a mulberry tree, and apparently those do pretty well here in North Texas, which is where I am. And mulberries in China, what they'll do with the mulberry tree is they plant them next to a pond, which is what I did. I've got a pond, and the mulberries fall in, and they feed the fish, and they do something with silk, like silkworms grow on the mulberry tree, and then they harvest the silkworms, and then they put them on these trays, and the silkworms lay a bunch, like they make their silk, and then, and then they like gather up the silk and into yarn, and you can weave it. Anyways, I know everyone wants to sit on their butts watching Netflix here in the U.S., but that might change before long, and that would be kind of a neat thing you could do, is grow silk, like the Chinese do. It's real nice material. And it's one of these things like in permaculture and any kind of smart agriculture where you use sort of systems that feed back into each other instead of like having one crappy thing and you have to keep adding inputs in order to get a little bit out. You get the system so that you get some synergistic relationships going about so that it's more efficient, and you get maybe a little bit of input and you get a whole lot of output, but a lot of the output feeds back in and then goes out in a different direction. Also, happy Valentine's Day to all you lovebirds out there. Not worrying about a thing right now, figuring the future is bright. You don't have to worry about a thing because, life just comes at us, and, hard times can be romantic too, and brings people together and keeps them together, and brings families together too. It's a beautiful thing. So, have a good Valentine's Day weekend. And I think that's plenty. Over and out. Good night.